You can't trust the consensus media. That's the topic of tonight's byline. It's simple. Media just can't be trusted. The consensus folks that buy into all the cool kid ideas and then refuse to question their beliefs, they're not telling you the truth. Now, some of you might be saying, how do we know you're telling us the truth, Lilley? Well, fair question. Look into what I say. If you don't believe me, do your own research. But do it on the other guys as well, because they're only telling you part of the story. I'll get into some Canadian examples in a moment, but let's look into some American ones first. You all know, because the media has told you, that George Bush is a moron. He can't read, he can't speak, he can't think. And we know Sarah Palin is a fool, and her every gaffe is still played up on the American and Canadian networks, even though she's not an elected official. But what about President Barack Obama? Have you ever seen him claim that he's visited all 57 states? Has that ever played in constant rotation on Canadian TV? He did that during the campaign. He said he's visited all 57 states, except one, plus that his campaign team wouldn't let him go to Hawaii or Alaska. So a man running for president claims there are 60 states and he's visited 57 of them, when there's only 50, and you don't hear about it. What about his comments on the weekend where he said billionaires should pay the same tax rates as Jews? Did you hear that?
And your response is that you want poor folks to pay more? Give me a break. If asking a billionaire to pay the same tax rate as a janitor makes me a warrior for the working class.
You didn't hear that, did you? Not in the news. He said that last weekend. Billionaires should pay the same tax rates as Jews. I'll grant Obama a mistake here. He likely wasn't attacking Jews. But had someone on the right said that, networks on both sides of the border would still be playing it. They'd be seeking reaction. They'd be wondering what he really meant. Have you seen this anywhere else? No. It shows that the anointed one has fault, so they won't show it to you. They wanted to show you plenty about the oil sands protests on Monday, though. Greenpeace and the Council of Canadians, well, they promised thousands of people would descend on Parliament Hill and engage in civil disobedience. They would show that Canadians reject the evil tar sands. Well, you saw lots of coverage of that, even though they only had a couple of hundred people show up. You saw that right there, a couple hundred people. Now compare that to the March for Life, the biggest annual protest on Parliament Hill. It fills the place, and the consensus media either ignores it or gives equal treatment to a few dozen counter-protesters who support abortion. It doesn't end there. Jack Layton, when we ran the story in the middle of the election about him being caught in a rub and tug, the other media outlets ignored it. Some reporters, not columnists or opinion mongers like me, but reporters played defense for the NDP leader. One stating online that being naked and using wet tissues is common practice during regular massages. Now that's a velvet touch to play defense for your side. We're seeing more of this on Parliament Hill. Tuesday morning, while I was flying back from Vancouver, where I went to interview Dick Cheney, I, along with Ezra Levant, well, I became the subject of some discussion among MPs on the Commons Access to Information Committee, the Ethics Committee. They want us to appear before them to discuss the CBC's reluctance to disclose how their $1.1 billion annual subsidy is spent. The other media outlets, they couldn't get enough of this. Not the fact that CBC won't dish on how they spend taxpayer dollars, but that Ezra Levant, myself, our boss, Pierre-Carl Pelleteau, that we would be called to appear. There are now more stories written about this by the consensus media than the fact that the CBC is using taxpayers' dollars for a court battle to keep its secrets. Why won't they tell you that the CBC refuses to comply with orders from the Federal Information Commissioner and a federal court judge? Well, because they're all in bed with the CBC. The state broadcaster is the biggest customer of the Canadian press. The Globe and the Star own the Canadian press. The National Post, well, they rely on sports content from CBC to keep itself and its website alive. CTV's parent company, Bell Media, well, they just launched a joint bid with CBC for Olympic coverage. They won't tell you the state broadcaster is thumbing its nose at taxpayers and refusing a court order because it goes against their financial interests. They could even lose advertising from CBC's generous ad budget, which the state broadcaster uses to keep other media outlets in line. Now, the rest of the consensus media will all chase a story showing that horror of horrors, the defense minister took a ride in a military helicopter. If that minister refuses to answer questions, it becomes a story for days. Show that CBC is abusing the law and they don't utter a peep. Our MPs, paid to look after our tax dollars, are not much better. If they wanted CBC to be more open, if the government specifically wanted to improve openness, they could tell CBC to obey the federal court order to release the documents to the Information Commissioner. Not to me, not to Sun Media, to the Information Commissioner. They could change the leadership of the CBC. They could cut their funding, but they won't. They've told them their budget is safe. They've praised the work of the CBC. New Democrat Charlie Angus is even worse. While he wants to hear from us at Sun Media, he wants to protect his pals at CBC.
It's nobody's public business when decisions are made about journalistic integrity at the CBC. That's within the mandate of their business end, because we are not allowed to see that in any of the other competitors. So we need an even playing field.
Angus thinks the CBC should have a level playing field? Is he stupid or is he lying to you? Because an annual grant of $1.1 billion tilts the playing field greatly, but it doesn't tilt it towards us. It puts every private media outlet in this country at a disadvantage. Mr. Angus, if you wanted a level playing field, you would either be calling for CBC to be cut or every other media outlet to be getting an annual subsidy. By the way, we don't want your money, or actually our money. The NDP wants to pretend that they're sticking up for equality here. They want to make sure that the CBC's journalistic practices are protected. Not ours, but the CBC's. Why? Because they're sticking up for their lefty friends. The Conservatives, meanwhile, they ask you for money. They send fundraising letters out to you and they bash the CBC. And they want you to give a donation for that. But then, when they have a chance, they don't act. They're trying to play you for fools. Both sides, they're trying to play you for fools here. They are patronizing you. And so are the other media outlets. Now, if you don't believe me, look up what I'm saying to you. Research it yourself. But they are either lying to you, telling you half-truths, but they're not telling you the whole truth. And that's what you deserve, the whole truth and nothing but. And that's the byline.